How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Some idea.
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying hate, of facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the Utopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the Utopia. This is the final scene. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the Utopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the Utopia. This is the final
Hey everyone, welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, a platform formerly known as Twitter, where we talk about really whatever I feel like talking about. And today we are talking about the cult of the far left. And this is a little bit more of a research-oriented day because I have some research I want to do, and I'm dragging all of you kicking and screaming along with me. Now, before we get started, can we get the likes on the video up, please? It seems as though everyone has forgotten to mount the like button. It might be one of those days where YouTube is not sending out notifications. So I need those likes to come up. Come on. Come on. Mount the like button. I need to see those numbers. You guys can do better than this. You know the rules. You tune into the stream, you mount the like button. It's the way it goes. Come on. We're not continuing this oh, yeah, see, that's what happened. It is a no notification type of day. It's a no notification from YouTube type of day. Isn't that fun? Well, thank you for everyone who got those likes up, and hopefully some more people keep trickling in. But this is going to be a relatively kind of just like, it's going to be a chill stream. It's going to be chill. We're not going to be ragging on James Lindsay today. I've already done that enough. I'm kind of like over it. I had a lot of stuff going on earlier, and you know, I just want to chill. I just want to chill. We're going to be doing some research today. The research we are doing is centered around this book called Socialist, Reconstruction. Now, we've talked about this book a couple times on the channel. We've actually done a couple Socialism Saturdays about this book. There are all sorts of presentations that exist out there about it. This is a book that was put together by members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. The Party for Socialism and Liberation is just, it is one of the most active far left groups in the country. They are more Stalinist than they are Leninist, so that actually makes them unique because most socialist activists in the United States are more Marxist-Leninist that reject Stalin, they reject Mao. The Party for Socialism and Liberation are actually pretty Stalinist, and so it's a little bit different. We actually have members of the Party for Socialism and Liberation on video talking about when they abolish the prisons, they're going to repurpose them to create the re-education gulags, where they're going to segregate all of the enemies of socialism away. And so hopefully they talk about that in this book. But this book is basically, it is their roadmap. It is the roadmap for the Party of Socialism and Liberation on what the socialist world looks like, and what do they, once they overthrow capitalism in the United States, which means abolishing the government, abolishing the Constitution, and abolishing a whole bunch of other stuff as well, what do they do then? What is the plan? Guess what? They have a plan, and they laid it out in this book called Socialist Reconstruction. And so I found some videos online of people actually going through this book. This is one of the sets of videos that I found. This guy has already gone through chapters 1 through 4, and there's another video where he's got chapter 5. And so I thought that we would watch this guy's videos, because this guy is actually, like, he's working through the books, he's taking notes, he's highlighting things. You can see. Hang on, can't see now for some reason. Are you gonna? Yep, gonna serve me an ad. Gonna serve me an ad. Of course, YouTube's gonna serve me an ad. So we gotta get rid of, we gotta get through the ad first. Anyway, we're gonna watch this video about the book where they're actually going through, and once we get through this ad, for some reason, which it should have already served me, but it didn't. God, this sucks. These ads suck so bad. These ads really, really suck. Guys, I promise you I will never make you watch ads like that on my channel. And the way you can do that is by heading over to my Substack, which is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year, because this is what funds my work. I don't make shit for ad money. And so my work is funded via super chats, via Substack, via one-time donations people make, via merch sales in my merch store. I usually don't even do ad reads. So if you want to fund the work I'm doing, head over to the Substack, sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. I really do appreciate it. No! I didn't skip it in time, and now we have another ad. While you're on the Substack, you can check out the podcast I posted last night under the Actively Unwoke podcast. You can listen to the Actively Unwoke podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. To find all the links, head over. You can just look up Actively Unwoke podcast. That'll bring it right up. But you can also head over to the podcast link in the top of the Substack. And I recorded a podcast last night basically analyzing if I believe that that person who shot up the Madison Christian School is a far left activist or not, because I see a lot of people saying that this person is trans. I see a lot of persons saying this person is a feminist. And I read the first 2 pages of the person's manifesto last night, and you can listen to it on this podcast if you haven't read it already. You can find the manifesto on the Substack. I did put the screenshots in there so people can read along. And you might be surprised at my analysis. So head over to the Substack if you want to know if I think this person is a leftist or a trans activist or a queer activist or a radical feminist or any of those things. A lot of people are saying a lot of stuff, but ultimately the language is our key to understanding them. And we can tell pretty clearly if someone is a leftist based just on the language that they're using. And so having 2 pages of a manifesto is more than enough for us to be able to identify that language. And while you're over there, you can find the link to Apple Podcasts. You can find the link to Spotify. You can just find the link to put into whatever podcast provider that you prefer. So sign up for the Actively Unwoke podcast. It's completely free. I do post on it fairly regularly. Stuff that you aren't going to find in other places. Stuff I don't talk about on YouTube or things like that. So head over there. You can sign up for that. Okay, are we done with these ads yet? Okay. So you can see in this video, this guy's actually going through the book. He's highlighting things. He's doing an analysis of it. So I thought that this analysis would be a great place to start because, no offense, but like, if I can listen to someone else's analysis of a book that I need to read anyway, it's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So it'll give us more insight into actually what the far left wants to do in the country. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Now, this is part of a larger project that I'm working on. For those of you who follow me, you know that I am working on a new book. It's called Re-Education, the Definitive Anti-Communist Guide to Decoding the Left. And you can actually follow along with the production of that book. I'd hope to have it done by December, and that just didn't work out. Sometimes book writing just takes longer. Sometimes life gets in the way, and it's just the way it is. But I am actually making really good progress on the book, and I'm really happy with how it's coming out. Basically, the book is filled with short chapters. The chapters are around 500 words each. So we're not talking about we're not talking about something that's complex here. The whole point of this is the feedback that I've been getting for a while is people who are new to my work, it's hard for them to get into it because it is a lot. When you first start listening to socialism, when you first start understanding that this is a different language, when you first start understanding that conservative influencers have been lying to you for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. Yeah, I don't actually really care about that because we care what real socialist activists do in the real world today. And that's where the lies are coming from, because so many people are focusing just on the cherry-picked philosophy. And I'm going to emphasize cherry-picked because there's a lot of philosophy. There's a lot of books that were written a long time ago by dead people. And so many people who are analyzing the left cherry-pick things. They say, this fits my narrative, that fits my narrative, this fits my narrative, that fits my narrative. They cherry pick the philosophy of dead people from 50, 100, 150, 200 years ago. And they cherry pick the stuff out that fits the narrative that they're trying to sell today. That's not my methodology. What I do is I watch real far left activists in the real world today, and I watch as many different groups as I can, and I tell you what the common themes are across all of the different places that they're analyzing based on what is happening in the real world today. Because the fact of the matter is, just because something was published 200 years ago does not mean it's being taught in the real world today. Just because Lenin wrote something down on a piece of paper one time does not mean it's being taught in the real world today. Just because Marx said something in a letter to a friend doesn't mean that's what's being taught in the real world today. There is a massive disconnect between what actually was written and the philosophy and what real socialist and Marxist activists are teaching and organizing around in the real world today. Sometimes it does come directly from the philosophy. A lot of times it doesn't. And there's also been a lot of stuff that's come up in between Marx and Lenin and Mao and Marcuse and Hegel and Adorno and Horkheimer and all these things. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the far left subcultures between when they were publishing and today. And those things, such as queer and anarcho-communist subculture, such as the zine subculture, such as manifestos, communiques, anarchist websites, all those things that like literally no one else is analyzing on the internet, all of those things tend to be actually significantly more influential of today's leftist activists than the stuff that was written 100 years ago. And so that's what we look at. And when I'm working on my book, Re-Education, The Definitive Anti-Communist Guide to Decoding the Left, what I'm doing is downloading everything that I know about the different themes that have shown up over and over and over and over and over again across all of the activist groups. Again, this is not what's in the philosophy. Sometimes it aligns and sometimes it doesn't. I'm telling you what's being taught in the real world right now. I'm telling you what they're teaching in their organizing meetings. I'm telling you what they're teaching at their events, in their trainings. This is what real activists are operating on. And so I'm breaking all that down in as easy a way as I possibly can to re-educate the public about who the socialist and communist left is. Now, when I started writing this book, and this is still my premise, I cannot write a succinct, concise book about everything the left believes and at the same time provide ample amounts of evidence to back up what I'm saying. Also, the vast majority of my evidence comes in the form of primary source video. If I'm writing a print book, and this will be a print book, I cannot include primary source video in the book. And people say, well, Carlin, there's the ebook. Well, there's still the print book. And so I cannot include primary source video evidence in the book. However, what I can do is create a companion website where you can go on, in theory, the companion website, pick out chapter 15 of the book, whatever you're reading at the time, and then watch video clips that back up what I say in the chapter of that book. So you can read it in the book and then go to the companion website and then watch the evidence that aligns with that. And quite frankly, this is a really big project. Because, and I don't know if it'll be done by the time the book gets released, but this is the eventual vision for this. Is I do want to have a companion website. I have a vision for it. And quite frankly, the biggest hurdle is I need to organize all of the clips and all the stuff I already have. Because I have a massive amount of clips, and that's another project I'm working on. I have a massive amount of clips, and not only on YouTube, but also on Substack, also on Twitter. I have clips on Twitter. Reagan has clips on Twitter on the Far Left Clips account. Bot has clips on Twitter on the Carlin Updates account. There are all these clips of my work that exists out there that back up what I say in this book that we kind of need to gather together and put some organization around so that we can create this companion website. So this is a long-winded way of saying the reason I want to work on research projects like this, like Socialist Reconstruction, like some other videos that I do want to watch in the last couple weeks of the year, because I find that the last couple weeks of the year are honestly the very best time to research this kind of stuff. I don't, again, like, guys. The reason we are watching this video about Socialist Reconstruction is there is a lot of presentations in the real world citing this book specifically. I can go on to any of the Party for Socialism and Liberation's training sites, their websites, their Twitter account, their YouTube channel, whatever, and I can find them talking about this book. This book I have never heard of before. The book you're recommending, I have never heard of it before. So I'm not going to read this book. And the reason I'm not going to read this book is I have literally never heard of socialist activists talking about it in the real world. And you know, I mean, I appreciate the suggestion, but I really need people to wrap their heads around my methodology. I am not looking at things that are not directly mentioned by real world activists in the course of their organizing today, because the rest of it is just people pontificating. The rest of it's not impactful. If real world activists are not talking about that book, reading that book, using that book as a guide, talking about it at their events, doing entire book tours around it where they're going to socialist bookstores all over the country and reading that book, if that isn't happening, then that book is not impactful on the far left. Do people understand this? Because you might have a favorite book about something. That favorite book, that just because something is a favorite book of yours doesn't mean that book is influential on the far left. Socialist Reconstruction is a book I can show you ad nauseum videos of them talking about. It's the same thing with Everything to Everyone, which is a book we've talked a lot about. It's Emmy O'Brien's book about the future socialist dystopia. It's the same thing with that book. There are tons of presentations about that book. I've seen her talk about that book at conferences. Just because you like a book does not mean it's actually impactful in the real world. So do people understand that? My methodology is very specific, and it's not going to change. Because I'm the only one doing it. It is by far the most effective way to analyze the left. It's how I know so much more about what the left is going to do than anyone else on the internet. It's a big deal. The methodology is the methodology. And well, I mean, and this is bigger than any one book or one video or things like that. So while I do appreciate recommendations, I hope people respect the fact that there is a reason that I'm doing it this way, and there is a method to my madness. By the way, guys, if you want to sign up on this website, which is speaksocialist.substack.com, you can actually read draft chapters of the book while I'm writing it, so you don't have to wait for the book to be published. This is $10 a month, $100 a year. This is separate from my main Substack. This is its standalone thing. And if you sign up as a founding member on the site, you do get a free anti-communist t-shirt, the same as my main Substack. If you sign up for both as a founding member, you get 2 free t-shirts. You can find out more information about that on the website. But this is actually how I'm funding the writing in the book. So if you guys appreciate the work I'm doing, and the supporters on the Substack will get a free digital copy of the book once it's actually done, because you guys actually supported the creation of it. So sign up for $10 a month, $100 a year. This is going to be the Substack. I actually have a series of books planned now. I have a whole bunch of books I want to write, and so it's not even just going to be this one book. I have at least 3 books in my head right now, possibly even 4, maybe even more like 4, that I do want to write about the left. And now that I feel like I have this methodology of putting the chapters out publicly before the book is published and having people give the ability to read those, this is something I want to keep up. So if you want to get access to all of my book chapters and my book notes and podcasts and stuff like that, sign up for $10 a month, $100 a year, and you guys make all this possible. And I really do appreciate it. That is speaksocialist.substack.com. Let me just look in the chat real quick, see what people are talking about. Let me see. Hey, Rationalist, I wanted to say to you, I don't want to dissuade you. If there's something on the website that will not be named that you want me to know that you think I need to know, I don't want to dissuade you from telling me that information. I just don't want to so like what you did yesterday with the Chris Burnett stuff. I don't want to dissuade you from telling me that, just because I don't want the website named on the stream. But just be like, if you have something to tell me, because I do appreciate you keeping an eye on that. If you have something to tell me, just say, Carlin, on the website that will not be named, this is happening right now, because I do appreciate that. Rationalist says, don't know if the same guy, but the same book has been recommended to you several times now, so kind of redundant to be telling you the same thing. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. So I do appreciate you, though, Rationalist. Idea, rewrite the Communist Manifesto and call it a classical the classical liberal manifesto. Maybe we'll do that another time. Maybe. All right, guys, let's just get into it. Let's just get into the video. Everyone, please mount the like button for me if you would be so kind. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. Let me just get all this set up here. Boot. There we go. And then, there we go. All right. Let's get this party started. What does this guy have to say?
Just moving on with chapter 1 here a little bit, the socialist revival. There's a number of very interesting points that they do and bring up here. It's mostly an overview, I think an important one of the history of socialism here in the United States, and making some important points about some key figures whose popularity is not often associated with their socialist politics, starting here with Albert Einstein. And as they say here, the memory of socialism and its immense contribution to progressive struggles for social and economic rights inside the United States was essentially extinguished or so horribly distorted for the 6 decades after the end of World War II that very few people alive today have any awareness of socialism's role in U.S. history. I will again say, just as another shameless plug, that a very small piece of my Buying Power books argument reflects this history here. The post-World War II rise of propaganda and psychological warfare targeting American citizens and beyond, with the idea that American-led, quote-unquote, democracy and capitalism is the best way forward for the entire planet. And a subset of that was the microcosmic assault on Black people here in the United States, with this idea that Black capitalism and indeed even a more microscopic look at buying power are solutions to centuries of enslavement, colonization, and inequality. So part of the goal, I think, in this book, I think importantly reminds us, is that there has been an assault more generally on the idea of socialism and communism, and then its interaction with, or it being an inspiration to many people, like, for instance, Albert Einstein, who was put under surveillance by J. Edgar Hoover for his socialist tendencies. They talk a little bit more here about Dr. King and flat out define him as a socialist, reminding us that as early as 1952, in a letter he was writing to Coretta, in response to her giving him a book on socialism and inviting him to consider it. He wrote that our economic system is going through a radical change, and certainly this change is needed. I would certainly welcome the day to come when there will be a nationalization of industry. Let us continue to hope, work, and pray that in the future we will live to see a warless world, a better distribution of wealth, and a brotherhood that transcends race or color. This is the gospel that I will preach to the world. So as they say here, the book that he got was Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward, published in 1887. And King said that at this point, I must thank you a million times for introducing me to such a stimulating book. You are sweet and thoughtful indeed. The letter also indicates that King was familiar with Karl Marx, that he read at least some of his works and agreed with a well-known Marxist theme. I've learned from reading Marx in books like Bellamy's that Marx and from reading Marx in books like Bellamy's, and that is that religion can so easily become a tool of the middle class to keep the proletariat oppressed. They remind us that inspired by these and other ideas and movements around the world, King was moving towards, as we've talked about here extensively,
Appreciate
a permanent encampment in Washington, D.C., where he asks in 1967, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising questions about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. So they go through a number of others, including Ben Davis, Paul Robeson, who had picked up these themes and ideas and were punished for it. And then they have a section here on canceling socialism that raises some very important points about, in all this discussion of cancel culture, the real cancellation has been on ideas of working class solidarity, struggle, and movements towards socialism and communism. They point out, I think importantly, that during the so-called Great Depression here in the United States and other capitalist countries, that whilst major capitalist economies saw tens of millions of workers suddenly lose employment, the unemployment rate in the US was 25% in 1932. The planned economy of the USSR experienced massive growth where there was no unemployment. Okay. And the biggest problem...
Planned economy. That's okay. So I've heard Barack Obama explicitly use the word... Actually, this is a good thing. Let me just bring you guys back. Check this out. Okay, hang on. Let me show you this. I was watching this clip last week and I was like, this is way more fucking... That's not what I wanted. This is way more fucking socialist than I even realized it was at the time. So... You just heard them use the term planned economy, okay? Hang on, I need to set up the sound. Let me play you this clip. This is Barack Obama last year. This was in a speech. I think Barack Obama gave this speech a year ago in November of 2023. I forget where he was giving this speech. You can probably find out on the Substack. But let me play you this clip. Listen for a term, managed economy, or he just called it a planned economy.
But just because an economic system generates wealth and innovation doesn't mean it guarantees a good society. Because from the outset, turns out market-based systems have been compatible with slavery, caste systems, colonialization, war, exploitation, corruption, fraud, autocracy, the poisoning of our natural environment. Fortunately, thanks to the accumulated efforts, bit by bit, of reformers and organizers and visionaries not so different from many of you, some, mostly democratic governments, began to recognize the need to moderate capitalism's excesses.
Wait.
Especially after the Great Depression and World War II. Governments began making public investments in education and transportation, scientific research and housing. They constructed a social safety net to protect at least some of their citizens from destitution. They granted workers the right to organize, passed laws to protect consumer and environment, enacted policies designed to maintain the integrity of the financial system, to prevent monopolies and bring the system back into balance.
Oh shit! So I guess he doesn't say it. I thought he said that it was specifically about like a managed or planned economy. Still, that clip is like really effing socialist. But like, suffice it to say, like, pretty much anytime you hear the term planned economy or managed economy, that is a reference to socialism, because that's explicitly what they're talking about, and that's what I want people to recognize as a part of this.
There was a labor shortage.
That was a socialist clip,
Just
though,
again,
huh?
pointing out
Crazy.
that these crises of inequality and collapse are created by capitalism and cannot be solved by capitalism. But instead of redistribution and socialism and communism, we got nominal tomes, claims about free speech. And yet, as they bring up here, it's a fairy tale when one considers that what happened to people identified as socialists, communists, or Marxists were sent to prison, lost their jobs and careers, and endured social demonization, isolation. Actors, directors, screenwriters were driven from Hollywood. Teachers and educators were either blocked from professional careers or purged from schools and universities. The capitalist class and governments represent repressive forces purged the U.S. of one of its most robust social and political movements. People in the U.S. were taught to hate and fear socialism.
As they should be. Again, explicitly.
I do again. I mean, I think this is important to remind folks. I think there's been a misconception, particularly in some areas within Black studies even, that somehow Marxism, adopting Marxism is a protective measure for academics, and that it's even encouraged. And this is simply not the case. I've witnessed it, experienced it myself, and even in my own attempt to bring an EEOC claim against my employer, was told here in Maryland, at least, although I think this is a federal issue, that politics are not a protective class. Race, gender, sexual identity, religion are protective classes. Politics is not. And I asked specifically, so if I was fired with the express claim that we're firing you because you are a socialist, they would be covered in that. And I was told yes. They couldn't say you're fired because you're Black, or you're a Jew, or you're mixed, or you're, if I were disabled, somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. Nope, that is all protected. But if they say, nah, we just don't like, he's Pan-Africanist, he's socialist, he's a George Jacksonist, he's fired, that would be acceptable.
It should be acceptable. We should make canceling socialists great again. We should make there should not be, like, socialists and communists should not be allowed to teach in public schools. I'm sorry. Like, at least from government jobs. Maybe we can't, like, maybe telling private employers who they can hire is, like, not necessarily, like, the best idea in the world. But when it comes to, like, publicly funded jobs, no. We should absolutely be banning socialists and communists from teaching in public schools. 100%.
They talk about the Wall Street bailouts in the 2008 financial crisis, $660 billion. A $7 trillion in loan guarantees. If you read Pam and is it Russ Martin's and Wall Street on Parade, they've argued that the real total is more like 19 trillion, I believe was the figure they put it at, in what was promised, given, protected, etc. And I like what they do here, is, at least as I interpret it, is that they raise the fact that, okay, capitalism, again, the theme here is capitalism is creating these crises of inequality. But instead of, again, amending or ending or destroying capitalism, what they do are protective measures. They are safety measures. They are designed to save capitalism. That's what those in power are comfortable engaging in. So when
So, okay, so what he's saying here, and we've talked about this a bunch of times, is that socialists believe that capitalism creates all problems. That is the origin point of all problems. That is why capitalism is the basis of their arguments around racism, gender, queer theory, environmental justice, reproductive rights, abortion rights, abolish the police, the campus protests, Israel, Palestine, what else? Disability rights, fast studies, everything, every single thing. Capitalism has created all these problems. The only way to solve these problems is to overthrow or abolish capitalism. So we cannot solve racism until we abolish capitalism. We can't solve gender inequity until we abolish capitalism, so on and so forth. So what he's saying here is the basic premise is that, listen, I know I just played a clip of Obama earlier talking about how we need to basically get rid of capitalism, but just understand, the real socialists and real leftists, they don't trust Obama. They don't trust any politicians. They don't trust any politicians associated with the two major parties, okay? Because they believe that it's in the best interest of those politicians. They can point out the problems, but then it's in their best interest to kind of keep the system in place because the system is what's propping them up. Does everyone understand that? So just because we can watch a clip from Obama where he says, quite frankly, really socialist things, that doesn't mean the real far left trusts him. That doesn't mean the real far left believes he's on their team. They believe that he's a traitor to them and has capitulated to capitalism.
there was the 2008 collapse, they just gave money back to Wall Street to float and protect that class and in their corporate manifestations. Then in 2008, they gave us Barack Obama.
In general, so whose wiki were you reading, Offensive Saint? In general, they believe the CCP that China's capitalist. So in general, they don't believe that China is doing what they want to do at all. You're a communist? See, sometimes it is actually kind of nice when sometimes real socialists and real communists join us in the chat because they can answer questions. So this person says, I am the real far left. Okay, which groups are you associated with? You don't have to tell us where you are, but which groups are you associated with? And then he says, oh, I actually do believe this person's a communist. He says, Obama was very milquetoast liberal and killed a lot of brown people with drones. Well, that's true enough. That's not very dialectical, I think. Well, okay. We might have some, oh, you're in Portland. Okay, of course you're in Portland. Of course you are. Okay. All right, well, stick around. We'll listen to you. Will everyone be nice to the socialist, even though we think he's insane and his ideas are very bad? Everyone be nice.
The 9 was a defining moment. It led to the unlikely victory of Democrat Barack Obama over Republican conservative millionaire John McCain. In 2007, no one would have expected.
See, the thing is, communist, we know you guys are armed. It's retarded Republicans and conservatives who don't know you guys are armed. So, again, this is a real communist and socialist in my chat, says he's from Portland, Oregon. He's saying communist things, so I actually agree with him. Says, if the Proud Boys come back, they should know we're armed this time. See, I've been telling people for years that real communists and socialists are armed. No one on the right seems to believe me because they think they own all the guns. No, they don't own all the guns. Nope, there you go.
That the United States was on the verge of electing the first black president. The conventional wisdom held that the history of racism was too deep for one of the two ruling class parties and risked choosing a black candidate for it. The conventional wisdom held that the history of racism was too deep.
There is actually, Offensive Saint, there is actually an answer to this. There is actually an answer to this. Hang on. Hang on. I'm going to show you. Queer... Do I have this on a video somewhere? Hang on. I know I wrote an article about this sometime. So there is actually an answer to this. I think I have a video clip of it on the YouTube channel. I can't find it right this second. The reason that so many communists are ugly and dysgenic is because they're queer anarchists. And queer is about pushing back against the norms in society. Queer is a far left political ideology that's specifically designed to undermine the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. Ultimately, the goal of queer is the annihilation of capitalism. They believe queer liberation will not be achieved unless capitalism is abolished. But what does it mean to push back on normative culture? They're pushing back on all the norms in society. So take, for example, actually, I will show you an example of Kamala Harris's stepdaughter, who you guys all got to know during the election cycle. I wrote an article about this on the Substack. This can be something good that we look at real quick. Hang on. Just need to find it. So Kamala Harris's stepdaughter is an example of someone who is queer. And we know she's queer because not only of how she looked, not only, but she also would say it. She also was involved in like activist causes that flat out were queer in their inception. Where the heck is it? Hang on. Apologies, I'm having trouble finding it. Hang on. Kamala. The most communist thing about Kamala Harris was actually her stepdaughter, ironically. So this is Ella Emhoff. Ella Emhoff is queer. So how do we know Ella Emhoff is queer? Because she doesn't shave her armpits. She's got weird tattoos. Look at this. These are queer tattoos. They dressed her up all nice, didn't they? But she's not trans. She's queer. She does gender bending stuff around the gender binary. What the styles are a style called ignorant tattoos, which is explicitly about queering tattoos, pushing back against the like beauty stand. Well, what like people like me who actually like nice tattoos, like people like me, we like nice tattoos. We like tattoos that look like things that take a long time to do. Queer Marxists don't like those types of tattoos. They call them ignorant tattoos. And so they have all these weird tattoos on them. So anyway, the reason that so many socialists look weird is that they're pushing back on the norms of beauty. They're pushing back on societal expectations around how you should look, how you should present. That's part of what being queer is to push back on everything normal. So it's not just Kamala Harris's stepdaughter. These are things we can look at haircuts. Actually, I'll show you a socialist haircut. I actually do have this on this. No! Why are you not letting me do this? Haircut. So this is what a socialist haircut looks like, where they have this weird mullet thing. They have these teeny tiny little bangs in front. They have the shaved sides of their head. Anytime I've been undercover at leftist events, there's people that have that haircut, like a lot of people who have that haircut. So it's just like they're doing weird shit, essentially, to prove that they can do weird shit. So there are answers to all these questions, guys. This is the point. It's like they don't just look weird because they're mentally ill or any of these things. There is a purpose to every single thing that they do. Oh, shit, you guys can't hear. Sorry. I didn't realize the sound wasn't working. Hang on. Mabi. Hang on, I'll rewind a little bit. I didn't realize the sound wasn't working.
Promise of dramatic change. And it was a powerful promise. And again, I will never forget that moment and the massive wave of propaganda and psychological warfare, the resistance that it created among even Black radicals to those of us who were critical of the idea of Barack Obama being a good thing. Again, I credit Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon, the late greats of the founding of Black Agenda Report, who in their prescient wisdom were already calling out Obama as fraudulent. And Margaret Kimberly was there too. I don't mean to omit her. She's still here doing her thing, and she was there as well. But it's just I had a very direct engagement with both Glenn and Bruce, and didn't, so I don't mean to anyway. So, but Black Agenda Report in general was, but the resistance that outlet got, and each of us as individuals got from within Black radical spaces in particular was shocking, I have to say. But Obama was, and I think accurately depicted here as part of that response. And that's what we and others were saying, and not enough, but we're trying to say, this is not a solution, this is a response. Again, the great Harlem debate is on our channel. You can go listen for yourselves. Every major Black radical luminary still on the planet in 2008, at least it feels like it, was there. All of them, you can hear for yourself the positions that they took, and you can hear for yourself why some should never have been invited back to offer up another analysis after what they said that day. But I was there. Some of us were there, sat through the whole joint and made sure like good old-fashioned radio journalists used to do. I made sure that my recorder was hooked up to the feed, to the actual feed itself. So you hear it loud and clear, what they all said. Because I knew, part of me knew that day, people were going to permanently entomb themselves with bad analyses. But they somehow were able to come back like the Walking Dead. They rise and rebrand themselves as golly, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's like the economists that we were talking about at the beginning who were constantly wrong, but they come back. I talk a little bit about it in my chapter in Cryptoganda, in the second edition of the Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, how these folks rebrand their errors and can come right on back. It's remarkable. As I say here, the revival of socialism could have something to do with what might be called the law of unintended consequences, because they talk a little bit about the rise of socialism, its popularity, particularly among young Americans, and as a response to the horrific conditions that continue to exist and worsen. So part of those unintended consequences.
Boss Bully Boy, what do you think the far left's going to do in like, what do you see the far left doing like in the next year or so? Can you give us some thoughts?
That well, the rise of socialism that had to be, which I should say differently, as a response.
Do you have proof of that? Do you have receipts?
To the rise of those to those unintended consequences, like the rise of an interest in socialism. We were given things like Obama's presidency. And then as they remind us here, he immediately abandoned his claims to protect universal health care. And I don't think, you know what, I'm reminded, I don't think they mentioned his other, actually, oddly enough, I think I'm catching a slight little error here, an odd error. Because they mention here that in 2009, the right wing of the Republican Party tried to block the passage of Obama's proposed Affordable Care Act, condemning Obamacare as socialist. They mobilized protest rifles in hand at town hall meetings throughout the country. Stop it. Redefining it as the Tea Party did as Stop Obama's Socialism, but that the irony, as they say here, and it's really not irony. This is another kind of a pet peeve of mine. Irony is never defined. The word has been destroyed by Alanis Morissette, and it's never used properly anymore. And I know I say that as someone who constantly makes errors and doesn't really even care about the language like that. I don't know why it's become a pet peeve, but irony, this is not irony. It's maybe a paradox or something else, but it's not irony.
Okay, get to the point,
the
please.
point being,
get to the
that
point.
Obamacare, quote unquote, was really a Mitt Romney Republican plan.
Well, that's
and was a replacement of universal health care, which Obama had already planned and agreed to get rid of and not run on or not bring it to his campaign or not bring it to his presidency. So Obama had already done it. But what they don't mention, I don't think they mention, I don't remember seeing it, is the Employee Free Choice Act. Yeah, I don't think they mentioned the employee, which I think would have been a
Damn, I remember watching you 2 to 3 years ago when you had thousands tuning into your live streams. I literally never had thousands tuning into my live streams, bro. That's actually completely false. That actually never happened. You made that up. Now you can barely get 70 to 80 viewers. Hang on, I'm just looking up Chris's channel activity. You really fell off. What happened? Press 1 in the chat if you think that Chris has ever chatted in on this channel before. Press 2 in the chat if you think that Chris is here for the very first time. I've got Chris's channel history pulled up right in front of me. Press 1 in the chat if you think that that Chris has ever been here before. Press 2 in the chat if you think that Chris is just here for the first time. Lots of 2s, Chris. Lots of 2. I mean, you have 40 to 50,000 plus. No, dude. No, I never did. No, you made that up. No. And see, people in the chat know you're full of shit, Chris. People in the chat know you're full of shit because they know you've never been here before. They know you've never been here before. They know people like you are low IQ retards that are literally just here to cause problems. Because low IQ retards like Chris don't care about doing anything productive. They don't care about understanding their enemy. They don't care about defeating the left. Yup, Poetry Painter bait chats every day. Hi, Poetry Painter. No, Chris, never been here before. Never been here before. You pressed the wrong number, Termite. That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, he's a great AI. Yeah, I know. I was really blowing up, wasn't I? It's probably your shape-shifting. You used to announce what a identitarian shining... Well, CRT is not actually anti-white, which I've said from the beginning. Nah, James Lindsay has... James Lindsay has actual principles. Okay, Poetry Painter. Okay, Jill. Okay, Jill. Okay, 500-pound shut-in fat-ass Jill. Okay, Jill. Who's what is Poetry Painter's real name? Okay, Jill, who is obsessed about me, is here every single day. Hate watches every single stream. You want to know why, Jill? You want to know why? Because you're not fucking smart enough to follow my fucking content. Now we'll ban your alt account again. You can create another one tomorrow in which we'll point out that you're doing exactly the same thing tomorrow, and we'll make an example of you every single day just to show how retarded James Lindsay's followers are. Back to our show.
Better reference for this point that they're making here. Because if people remember, Obama had previously promised to defend the EFCA, the Employment Free Choice Act, which would help.
And Jill, tomorrow, if you do this tomorrow, I'm bringing up the picture of what you look like, fat ass. Tomorrow, I'm bringing up the picture to prove that you're a 500-pound loser shut-in who never leaves your house, and this is why you're hate watching all of my streams, and I'm going to show people exactly what you look like because, Jill, you were stupid enough to post your picture on a public Facebook page, and really, that picture never should have seen the light of day, Jill. It never should have seen the light of day. I know exactly what you look like. Many of us know exactly what you look like, and starting tomorrow, we're going to show that picture every single time you disrupt my chat.
Working people unionize, and immediately abandoned that upon election and then never brought it up again. So so now that I'm thinking about it, I think they should have mentioned that. Anyway, in this chapter, they talk about, again, the unintended consequences included the rise of socialism, the rise of Occupy Wall Street in 2011. But, you know, for all the good that they're saying they did here, remember that we also got, as a result of the so-called rise of the people, we also got things like Tim Pool.
Tim
who I
Pool
believe traces his rise and origins as a
Tim
people's
Pool
journalist and a liberal
mentioned by
to
Socialist.
Occupy Wall Street. So, you know, but I hear, but as they say here, the spread of the Occupy movement alarmed the capitalist class. That is likely true, and that's probably why they made sure we got people like Tim Pool. They talk about then the role of racism, as I think that they would put it, and around the specific issue of the killing of Michael Brown Jr. and the rise of Ferguson. And then they make the point that there is, but this is, again, to remind us of the racism in the country. Again, it's just sort of a recap here. And then they get into a little bit of how Bernie Sanders was destroyed despite being tagged as a socialist. As they say here by Anderson Cooper, the hall erupted in applause when Sanders finished speaking in response to a question by Anderson Cooper about him being a socialist, or as he said, a democratic socialist. The Sanders campaign...
Just for the new people, do you guys want to see what Poetry Painter looks like? Just so that Jill knows that I'm not fucking around. Do you guys want to see what Poetry Painter looks like if you've never seen her before? I'll show you. I'll show you. Bing. That's Poetry Painter. And the reason I have this, just in case Jill accuses me of doxing her, the reason I have this is that this was all available on her public Facebook page. It was all publicly available, which is why I have access to this. So that's what Poetry Painter looks like. And she's watching right now because she watches every single stream start to finish because she just can't help it. Because she's a 500-pound fat ass that doesn't leave her house, that doesn't have anyone to love her, that has no job. She claims every once in a while she does volunteer opportunities. But no job, no love, no company, certainly no sex. I mean, who would ever? But this is every time James Lindsay retweets Poetry Painter, this is who we're dealing with. Every time she writes a new chapter about how I have some mental health thing, whatever, this is who we're dealing with. I want everyone to keep that in mind. This is James Lindsay's best friend. This is James Lindsay's informant. This thing. This. Yes, this is actually Offensive Saint. How nice of you. Let's hope she finds Christ. Oh, no, she doesn't have kids. No. This is just, she just can't get a job and doesn't want to leave the house because she's a 500-pound fat ass. Anyway, that's who we're dealing with every time there's a disruption on my stream, every time there's a nonsense going on online. And now you guys know. They always look like that, don't they? They always look like that. It's the anonymous cowards on the internet that always look like that. Every single time.
Reported that their phones and computers lit up with small donations. In the few hours after Cooper pinned the dreaded socialist label on Sanders, the Sanders campaign received more than $3 million in small donations. So the point being here, Sanders Cooper's trying to get rid of him by calling him a socialist, and it in fact inspired more support. So what comes with more support? More repression. And where do you learn more about that? From George Jackson. So that's why we'll be back with him next week. And but in 2016, as they say here, the Democratic Party said the 2016 Democratic Party primary, Sanders won 13 million votes and 80% of younger voters. Democratic National Committee emails released by WikiLeaks show that the Democratic Party establishment violated its own rules to get Clinton the nomination. We've talked about that endlessly here. the Pied Piper candidate being Donald Trump, meaning that he would bring all the lunatics over to the Republican Party and assure a victory for Hillary Clinton. That, of course, is not how it worked out. Sanders was crushed by his own party. And I don't know if the PSL folks have read his last book, but to me, it demonstrates that I think they're even a little bit wrong here about what they could have expected from Sanders. He was not. Well, I did a whole thing about that. You can see it if you want. I'll put the link in the show description. But Bernie was not, I think, the positive, the bonus that he's given credit for. However,
well, okay. So you're seeing a socialist on the screen saying he doesn't like Bernie. He doesn't think Bernie would have worked out. But, listen, there is something to be said for the fact that Bernie was like probably the closest to a socialist viable presidential candidate that they ever got. Right? And Bernie was legitimately fucked over by the Democratic Party, not once but twice. And so even though Bernie is not a perfect socialist, and even though they kind of disavow him now, would they have been like upset if he won? No, probably not, because he's probably the closest that they would ever get to being in that type of position, right? And so I think that Bernie did bring a lot of energy to it. Bernie, you also got to understand, Bernie changed a lot between when he ran in 2016 and 2020. Like, he changed. Wait, was it 2016, or did he just run in 2020? I forget. Bernie changed a lot, essentially. Like, at some point, Bernie did actually become a millionaire. And Bernie was in politics forever, and I'm from Vermont, so I understand Bernie. Like, I voted for Bernie Sanders in every election that I could vote for him from the time I was 18 years old, because I grew up in Vermont. I lived in Vermont for most of my life, right? And so Bernie used to actually be much further left than he was, but once he became a millionaire, things kind of changed. Anyway. It's Poetry Painter because she's literally been hate watching you for years. I had to look up the whole CRT as an anti-white thing. Yeah, and by the way, CRT isn't anti-white. CRT has nothing to do with skin color. I was still 100% correct about that. I was 100%. Now I was getting harassed every day of my life about saying it. So I maybe was a little bit more yelly back then. And I was pissed off and frustrated because I was literally getting harassed all the time not by Groypers, but by No White Guilt and his like retarded toxic followers. And so but CRT actually isn't anti-white. I was correct about everything I said. So whatever. Yeah, it was in 2016, wasn't it?
what I do like about what PSL and Socialist Reconstruction book here is doing.
Do leftists hate themselves? No, not in any way. No, they don't hate themselves at all. They believe the world would be better if capitalism didn't exist. Offensive Saint, how Offensive Saint is a groyper, okay? You know how you guys are pissed off at the fact that you can't find women that you want to marry because the world has ruined women. The educational system has ruined women. They made them all feminists. Media has ruined women. Social, women today suck, right? And there's reasons that women today suck. And a lot of the groypers are kind of pissed off about the fact that women suck, and it's the world that they live in that has made women suck. You have some frame of reference to this, right? Socialists believe and communists believe that the world sucks because capitalism has made it suck, in the same way that groypers believe that women suck because the world has made women suck. It's like the same thing. Now, do you guys hate yourselves because you believe women suck? No, you don't. You guys definitely don't hate yourselves. And it's the same thing with with socialists and communists. They don't hate themselves. They believe that everything sucks because capitalism sucks. Oh, no. Fuck that asshole. No. Well, yeah, this is what I'm saying. And most of the groypers have Riz, to be honest. Most of the groypers are perfectly fine. They're not undateable, they're not unlovable. Like, a lot of groypers are good looking, a lot of groypers are really funny, a lot of groypers can get whatever girls they want to get, but it's about finding girls that like you like. That's the problem. I understand that now. I didn't always understand that about you guys, but I understand that now.
Is saying, okay, Sanders was reflective of an actual will among the people. The party itself crushed him. That is, the Democratic Party itself crushed him. But as they say here, the Bernie phenomenon was path-breaking, even mind-blowing, because of the post-World War II witch hunt against socialists and communists. Maybe I've been unfair. Maybe I need to reconsider that point more. I've not felt that he was path-breaking or mind-blowing, because again, I still feel like his net impact was to be part of what this book is saying was necessary as an unintended consequence of the inequality created by capitalism. That is, part of the unintended consequence was an interest in, or at least a critique in capitalism. So instead,
did you guys hear that? The inequality created by capitalism
was necessary as an unintended consequence of the inequality created by capitalism. That is, part of the unintended consequence was an interest in, or at least a critique in capitalism. So instead of allowing that to rise naturally and evolve naturally into an actual support for socialism, we are encouraged to find our answers in Bernie Sanders and democratic socialism and his presidential runs, or his primary runs in the last two election cycles. And what I'm saying is that is part of the response to the unintended consequence of the rise in interest in socialism among particularly young people. That if 80% of young people want socialism, then the establishment is happy to give them Bernie Sanders, who they A, know is not a true socialist, and B, is going to succumb to the will of the Democratic Party, the National Committee, the DNC, at the end of the day, and give us what we got, Biden. That said, as they say here, as noted at the outset of the chapter, some of the most influential people living in the United States were socialists and communists. Among the better known were Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, Paul Robeson, Albert Einstein, Helen Keller, James Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry, Charlie Chaplin, A. Philip Randolph, Eugene Debs, W.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, John Reed, Huey P. Newton, Kwame Ture, and Bayard Rustin, to name a tiny handful. They played that is, communists and socialists played leading roles in opposing segregation, lynching, apartheid, and all manifestations of Jim.
Rationalist says, it must be quite a strange experience to have been on the internet under significant scrutiny. Yeah, it is actually a very strange experience. For 4 to 5 years now. Like, you've seen so many people come and go, backstab and betray you. Yeah, all that is actually very true. It's kind of like off topic, but you know, it is actually, I never wanted to be on the internet. I never wanted to be a public person. So that in itself is actually very strange to me. The fact that I'm on video every day is very strange to me. And you know, kind of seeing people, seeing how people change, how the internet changes people, seeing previously normal people that like I knew that were normal at one time, and then they're on the internet all the time, and they're trying to get famous on the internet, and they're cloud chasing, and they're like climbers and stuff like that, and they completely change into like a hideously toxic, deranged version of who they used to be. Seeing the amount of backstabbing that goes on, I don't trust anyone anymore. Really? Like, I really don't. Seeing how easily people will backstab each other over getting views on Twitter, over a little temporary viral fame. Like, I've had viral fame, okay? I've had viral fame to the tune of like tens of millions of people. Like, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be on like all these shows. I know what it's like to you know, have all these eyes on you. and it's so fleeting. And it honestly, it's like none of it is even real. It's all just like contrived bullshit narrative. Now, I didn't realize that at the time. Like back in 2020, I didn't realize that. Because I thought I was doing something to help people. I did. And I was wrong. I was being used by the system. But like when you have that experience of being used by the system and then discarded, and then but you see it from a different angle, you know what I'm saying? It's like I know how meaningless a lot of this stuff is. How it seems so meaningful at the time. You're going viral, you're getting tens of millions of views. It seems so meaningful at the time. A year later, no one even remembers it. 6 months later, maybe, no one even remembers it. And it's like, you're in this constant state of like, a lot of people find themselves, I never wanted to be famous, so I was never in that constant state of like chasing that next viral moment, right? But sometimes people have that viral moment and it puts them, and they get so much attention. And they're like, oh my God, I've been validated. And then it all goes away. Because a viral moment doesn't last very long for most people. It usually just goes away. And then those people get into a place where they're chasing that next viral moment. And everything becomes about that next viral moment. And oh my God, I have to do this again and again and again and again and again. And it makes them into horrible, inauthentic people. So, yeah, I've seen a lot. And I mean, to be honest, and I know this is like way off topic of the stream, but like I'm taking a point of personal privilege. Like, to be honest, it's like, that's part of why I'm so happy with where I am right now. Where I have a niche community that supports my work. I have financial independence from all of this. I don't need to rely on fucking anyone except for, you know, people who come to my streams and they're actually interested in what I'm doing. I have a little niche community where I can fly under the radar of most of the bullshit. I'm not like I'm known enough by the right people, but I'm not famous. I'm not quote unquote relevant, and I fucking love that. I love that. Because it keeps me out of all the bullshit, honestly. Yeah, you see how transactional they are? They use you, they discard you. Yes, this is very, very true. I was used for the entirety of 2020 and propped up as like the Democrat that left the left and all this stuff. I was their little token that they trotted around. And then as soon as I was no longer useful to them, discarded. And it wasn't even that I was discarded. Then they started planning hit pieces on me because I went off the reservation and I said things that they didn't want me to say, right? I went off the approved narrative. And so then they started planning hit pieces on me. They started like doing these smear campaigns on me to try to discredit anything I was doing. And that was another big wake up call when the smear campaign started and when the attacks started. Oh shit. And this is why I have a lot of, I guess, empathy for Nick Fuentes, because I didn't realize until October 7th that they had done the same thing to him that they did to me. And it's a playbook that they roll out over and over and over and over and over again. When someone becomes inconvenient, there is a playbook. And once I realized that what happened to me happened to Nick Fuentes when he was 18 years old at a much bigger scale than it ever happened to me. That's when I saw. Because they do this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They use people up, they spit them out, because they don't actually care about solving the problem is the thing. All they care about is money and influence and narrative, and that's it. But in the meantime, I was lucky enough to build a little platform, and I was lucky enough to have an audience, and I was lucky enough to be able to take what I built and do something with it. And so I may not have the biggest voice on the internet, but at least I'm doing something that matters. And at least I'm trying to do it from an authentic place of actually trying to solve the problem. You know what I'm saying? I bet back in 2020 when they welcomed you with open arms, you never would have guessed it would be the right that would be. No, I never would have guessed. But a year later, that became very clear. Anyway, let's get back to our show. I appreciate the little sidetrack, though. It's kind of interesting to me it's interesting to me to do the thought exercise of thinking through some of these things. There is a book I want to write at some point on my list of like all the books I want to write about. I actually started writing it. I have this Substack called Nick and I, which it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek kitsch way of looking at my experience with all this bullshit on the right and Nick's experience with all this bullshit on the right, and how those things overlap and how we've experienced the same thing. So I kind of have this started. I have a whole chapter outlined in my head. I have a whole bunch of chapters for that book I've got written in my head that I just haven't made it into the Substack yet. But I do actually want to write a book about this because it's fascinating. Just the methodology that they just use over and over and over again. And once you see it from actually being a part of it, you see things very differently.
Crow police state. At the end of World War II, the Communist Party in the U.S. had approximately 100,000 members and probably 1 million active sympathizers.
No.
As
Nick is not my son. I kind of think of Nick as like, not my son. I'm not that old. Offensive. I guess if I'd had him really young, he could be. How much older am I than Nick? Hang on, let me do math for a second. Oh God, this is about to make me feel really old, isn't it? Yeah, I guess if I'd had Nick young, I guess he could be my son. But I think more of him is like a little brother sort of thing, like a bratty little fucking brother. Or like I'm like the crazy cousin or the crazy aunt sort of thing. But I don't like to, my son, God, bite your tongue, offensive saint, bite your tongue.
Is maybe predictable. What Donald Trump, they say, represented in 2020 and is likely to represent here again in 2024 is the unity among the ruling class against their common enemy of socialism. By uttering the magic words, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country. Trump momentarily united the leaders of both ruling class parties against their common enemy. They put aside their partisan bickering to genuflect at the altar of anti-socialism. And this is why Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were right there to applaud Trump in that moment. They go on in this chapter to talk about the inequality in representation, that is how just 3% of U.S. households have assets of $1 million, yet and more than half of U.S. workers make under $35,000 per year, but not a single person from this category, that is the majority of the population, sits in Congress. The Millionaires Club in the Senate passes itself off as the world's greatest deliberative body, but it is and has always been an empowered body of plutocrats. It was created to block sweeping progressive legislation, and if the House of Representatives ever passed such laws, as Senator George F. Hoare stated, the very purpose of the Senate is...
The Senate was created, they believe, to block sweeping progressive legislation. Isn't that interesting? Because we've heard socialists say that they want to abolish the Senate basically for exactly that reason. So it's actually in their book.
To resist the hasty, intemperate, passionate desire of the people. And if I remember correctly, Alexander Hamilton's Federalist Papers, one of them, I thought it was 22, but I might be wrong. He said the same thing, that the Senate was to reflect the British Parliament's upper house and was there to represent the true will of the elite and to protect against the representatives of the lower house being able to pass laws that would upset that ruling elite. So they conclude the chapter by saying the American Revolution was a political revolution, not a social revolution. The U.S. Civil War was more like a real revolution, a social revolution than the 1776 revolution, the decisive military factor leading to in other words, that it changed, that the political revolution changed political power, but not social relationships. Whereas the Civil War, apparently, according to the authors here, was more like a real revolution, a social revolution, than the 1776 one. The decisive military victory leading to the defeat of the Confederacy was the belated Emancipation Proclamation signed by.
I've just had the epiphany, and I'm not happy about this, and fuck you very much, offensive saint. I've just had the epiphany that most groypers could actually be my kid. I'm having some feelings right now. I'm not happy about it.
President Abraham Lincoln in January of 1863, and the subsequent flood of 200,000 free black people into the Northern Army and Navy. The North finally won when the conflict became an armed revolutionary struggle of the black working class in the southern states. Formerly enslaved people became free people, recognized as citizens with formal rights associated with citizenship and no longer the property of others. So it is fascinating to be reading George Jackson's Blood in My Eye and his consistent refrain about property rights not being upset, and the property relations not being upended. So reading that line, the North finally won when the conflict became an armed revolutionary struggle of the black working class in the southern states. That's exactly what George Jackson is saying about the entire black colony. That to upend, to create a real revolution, one that upends social relationships, you have to upend property relationships. And that would require, according to Jackson, and apparently what was seen here, happening during the Civil War, an armed.
Yeah, the next poetry painter article is going to be like, Carlin admits to having incestuous pedophilic relationships with groypers. True, probably.
Revolutionary struggle of the black working class. By 1876, different factions of the warring capitalists from its south and north overcame their differences, reunited, and empowered the class of former slave owners at the expense of the rights of the aspirations of the formerly enslaved. So this is where they conclude the chapter by talking about the first and second reconstructions. The first one coming after the Civil War. In the 1950s and 60s, many civil rights movements saw their new movement as the second Reconstruction. But even after that, the ruling class retained control over the banks, corporations, land, and media. The unfulfilled promises of the first and second Reconstructions are glaring and persistent injustices in contemporary society. The third Reconstruction is premised on socialist control and redistribution of the vast wealth and resources created by the labor of the multinational, multiracial, and multi-ethnic U.S. working class. So that's what they're proposing here, that the third Reconstruction be the one that finally fills in the voids left by the first Reconstruction, which was political, not social. The second Reconstruction, which they say was social but not political. And the third Reconstruction will meld all of that, creating a true revolution where the social and political relationships are overthrown and changed. So the first Reconstruction promised 40 acres of farmable land and a mule to those who had labored but had never been paid. That promise was broken. The second Reconstruction made only a political promise of equality under the law. The third Reconstruction, because it will be a socialist Reconstruction, will finally guarantee both the full economic and political rights for all, with a focus on redressing and overcoming the centuries of super oppression imposed on Black Americans. This book sets out a vision for society after the revolution. Socialist Reconstruction will solve the problems capitalism creates, ending production for the sake of private profit and replacing it with production based on meeting the needs of the people and the planet. And then we get a few images of the kings.
Hey,
Occupy.
Termite gifting a membership, and Suzanne is the lucky winner. Thank you, Termite, for the gifted membership. We'd appreciate it.
Ferguson. Some of the notable socialists, including Assata Shakur. and socialism has a rich and diverse history, much of it that has been hidden. So we'll come back with chapter 2 at another time. Stay tuned. But I wanted
video,
to at least go through some of what
it's all part. Let's go to part chapter 2. I don't
Party
care
for
about
Socialism and Liberation, the socialist government, the form and function of a new democracy. And before we proceed, I did just want to say I was trying to think about how best to summarize this, because I am appreciative of the variety of politics that we get on this network, on this platform. But I'm not, admittedly, I'm trying to figure some things out and see where we might want to push and be pushed by all of this. But what I wrote as a note here is that the primary value of this text for me is not to challenge nationalism or Pan-Africanism or a variety of African-centered viewpoints, but in some way, and it is not again to re-enter the fray of the socialism is Eurocentric or not argument, but it is to say for me that it is some way to address my own struggles with these ideas. For instance, would it not be better for any independent nation if this country were genuinely socialist and run by a worker-led democratic government where, as this book argues, elected leadership is not a full-time job and one is easily recalled? And as we'll get into, where new forms of government are established. So in other words, I'm not suggesting, and in my frame or my approach to this, I'm not suggesting that this be a replacement for anyone else's or any other politics. And I don't see this as being in contradiction to arguments more popularly made or held or perspectives on this platform. The variety of isms I just mentioned. So I'm not, what I am suggesting again, and this is something I always get stuck on when we consider internal colonialism and colonization and nationhood, versus statehood, etc. I'm not an independent sovereignty, so on and so forth. I'm not sure. I've always get stuck at the question of, well, what good is it to have yet another quasi-independent nation when the fact of this empire has not been properly dealt with? In other words, maybe some would see this as an advance, and maybe it is, to say that, to step up from where Black people are currently to some form of advanced nationhood and nationalism. Maybe.
You think Jared Kushner's taking money from the Saudis? The communists think that Jared Kushner's taking money from the Saudis? Bro.
It is an advance to move to that and then deal with the still rampant imperial powers that be. What good is it to have yet another colony, so to speak, or colonized nation with flag independence is sort of the point I'm getting at. So if this country, what happens globally to the Pan-African struggles and movements, to African independence movements, if this country's capitalism and empire is upended and transformed into what this book is describing. Also, it helps reconcile for me the ongoing disagreements around nationalism and socialism. This to me is the most viable and supportable project outside proper nationalism, in that, see my previous point, and that it forces a radical confrontation among those not supportive of nationalism and provides a lane that is both a parallel and in solidarity. So again, whether it's non-Africans or Africans not situated as much as some as others in terms of nationalist politics, this seems like a way to say, okay, fine, you don't want to support nationalist politics, you don't want to support various forms of African-centered thought or Pan-Africanism, cool, but you can't cop out, and you can't abandon a broader global struggle, and you can't become a silly liberal. You have to re-engage radical politics differently. And this, to me, is something that anyone who claims any interest in any form of radicalism should, at minimum, be able to support. All right, so that's it. That's again just a quick summary of some thoughts that I was having as to how I'm trying to reconcile what I find fascinating about this work and my interests elsewhere. Okay, so just a few points, and then I can come back. I'll just summarize what this chapter does, and then I can come back and we can go through a couple quotes, and then I can check the chat for questions, comments, and criticisms. But initially, what I liked about what this chapter says is that again, they're attempting to lay out a practical approach to bringing about and the construction of a socialist government. And I think it's helpful as we hear vague references and I think rebranded discussion of socialism, that they do this and give some sort of based in real appreciation for socialism and its history, some sort of guideposts or some points of reference to build from. So the chapter immediately begins by challenging the basis and the claims and the narratives of this country.
Fuck, I'm actually just gonna have to read this book, aren't I? I'm just gonna have to read the fucking book. A foundational step in the socialist reconstruction of the United States is the creation of a new constitution. Bada bing, bada boom. They want to overthrow the Constitution. They want to overthrow the United States government. This new constitution will differ profoundly from that of the current capitalist state. Socialists call the current government the capitalist U.S. government. They believe the Constitution was founded in capitalism. Socialism revolutionizes the form and function of government, making it truly democratic for the first time. Anytime you hear socialists use the term democracy, they're not talking about what we have right now. They're talking about socialism. Socialism revolutionizes the form of government because political power is in the hands of the working class. For the first 87 years of the United States' existence as an independent nation, the slave-owning class was dominated government power. This is why whiteness means capitalism right here. The slave-owning class dominated governmental power. This is where systemic racism came from. After 1865, industrialized capitalists and Wall Street bankers held it. This is what they call Fordism. They call it the Industrial Revolution, the Fordist Revolution. They sometimes refer to, they sometimes like literally call it that. It's like out of Brave New World. With the socialist revolution, the working class will control the government and the state. For the first time, majority rule will not be a deceptive slogan, masking domination by a clique of capitalist exploiters. Majority rule will be real.
By challenging the basis and the claims and the narratives of this country's constitution and its claims constitutionally. The current U.S. government conceals its bourgeois class character under deceptive labels.
Capitalist.
So, oh man, my bad. Let me get it back here, and there we go. So they're talking about here the development of a government that is for the people, by the people, challenging the hidden bourgeois nature of the current capitalist constitution, which protects property rights. Again, a la George Jackson, and
the capitalist constitution protects property rights. Okay? Because capitalism, according to the left, is defined as private property ownership. The capitalist constitution protects property rights about everything else. I just put him in a timeout. He needs to cool it, to be honest. We're trying to work here.
The need to fundamentally upend property rights, which
there it is.
From this perspective, is basically the font of all the world's evils. And what they also do, and talk about Lenin's dictator of well, initially of the bourgeoisie, and then saying that there needs to be a dictatorship of the proletariat. That he drew attention away from the fact that the government was designed to serve the interests of a numerically tiny exploiting class, and that was his purpose of using dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and that to try to redirect people's the concept of government and the quote unquote group that it serves being expanded from a tiny minority ruling elite to the people and the workers themselves. The chapter then also strongly challenges notions of federalism, and I really appreciated this because and the founding of this country, the so-called founding fathers' love of federalism as opposed to democracy, and this is something that I used to focus on a lot myself and try to argue around myself, and I really appreciate how this book approaches that point. All right. So essentially, they're saying that the country is run by the 500 biggest companies that constitute 2/3 of the country's gross domestic product. If you ever want to get an idea of who these folks are,
put the words on the screen
and how they are unified.
I don't care about looking at you. I want to see the book.
Despite the claim that they are supposed to be in some form of capitalist free market competition, you could simply peruse at your leisure, just as an example, the
Rottweiler, he's reading the Party for Socialism and Liberation's Socialist Reconstruction book, but I don't think he's part of the PSL. I think he's just reading the book. I'm not sure what group he's a part of.
Business Roundtable, which is basically the lobbying arm of those top 500 companies. And I see they've redone their website since I've last been here. But they're simply basically the lobbying
I don't care.
arm.
I want you to read the book. Read the book. Bring back the book. Bring back the book.
They are talking
don't
about.
Care. There we go.
National unitary state. Get rid of federalism, create this unitary state. That will allow for, as they describe in the book, full.
All right. This is how current socialists today view U.S. history. Were their socialists active throughout our history, or how active were socialists in our past and thought and acted according to these ideas? Pop quiz for the chat. What am I going to say to this question? The answer to my pop quiz will lie in what my methodology is. Paultron is saying this is how socialists view things today, but how did socialists view things in the past? How am I going to answer his question? Any ideas? We talked about it earlier. The answer is I don't care. I don't care. There are a lot of people studying the history of socialism, the history of the philosophical development. What I'm interested in is what are socialists doing right now? What are they teaching right now? How are they organizing right now? What ideas are they putting forth right now? It doesn't really matter what was done in the past unless we see those same ideas from the past show up now. If they showed up in the past and then they went away, I don't care. It's not relevant to what I care about because we care about what they're doing now. Dead people aren't relevant unless it's what they're using today. So that's my methodology. There are a lot of people who use a different methodology, and I'm not suggesting there's no value in looking at what they did in the past. I'm just suggesting that that's not what I'm doing, and it's not part of the way I do this analysis.
Spectrum planning, which I like, as opposed to what we often hear and discuss sometimes, full spectrum dominance, which is the approach of those in power, particularly through their approach to media and it being a dominant force in conquering the convictions and the land and resources. So instead of full spectrum dominance, we would have full spectrum planning. And the book gives several examples, including China, although they're careful to point out, they're saying China is not the model. China is not, we're not, pushing Chinese propaganda as we're often encouraged to believe here, but we're recognizing that China as a modern example, and particularly as they point out through the response to the COVID pandemic, because of their unitary state and their full spectrum planning, as opposed to state by state by state by state planning, which of course was only constructed to defend enslavement and an electoral college, which this chapter talks about abandoning, of course. But because of the ability to full spectrum.
So it doesn't surprise me at all that the book talks about abandoning the electoral college, because that's just one aspect of our system that the left does want to abolish. But did you guys know that the Democrats introduced a bill in the Senate to eliminate the electoral college like yesterday? So there are some ideas that trickle down from the far left into the Democratic Party. It's not as though the Democratic Party never puts forth these ideas. But isn't it funny when they do? Now, of course, the Democrats know that bill is never going to pass. There's no expectation that that bill is going to pass. The reason it got introduced was as a nod to the far left in the party. It's to say, don't worry, we're doing some stuff for you too, even though everyone knows it's never going to pass. And the far leftists know it's never going to pass either. So it actually kind of tends to piss them off more than anything, because they know it's not real. But that's one of those ideas that's trickled down from the far left, is the abolition of the electoral college.
Plan, the unified state could quickly mobilize resources where in society they needed to be mobilized. And using the subset of highly involved, democratically constructed mass organizations that this chapter talks about, they could move youth groups here and this group there and this group here and quickly address a pandemic, get everybody protected, get them the resources they need. By the way, produce a situation where nobody lost their job, nobody lost their home, nobody lost anything, unlike all around here. And people were more or less relatively quickly able to resume and get back a post-pandemic, relatively speaking, reality. But here, because so much is as they talk about in this chapter, done piecemeal, as opposed to addressing what in large scale what we need to, the societal existential crises and issues, we're stuck in this society moving backwards. And those of us who are oppressed to varying degrees and colonized and all of these other, obviously it gets worse and worse and worse. And everybody is sort of left to the individual state, like the vicissitudes of every individual state so I can go here, maybe get something I can't get here. And this isn't happening because this state apparatus. No, unified state, democratic central leadership, that is, as this book talks about, this chapter in particular talks about, is run by elected officials that are not full-time employees. They are still working people who, in addition to that work, serve at the behest of those who elect them to carry out the will of the people, so to speak. And to the extent that they don't, they can be easily and quickly recalled. All of this sounds so much better than what exists today. And I, again, am very happy to want to sort of push people, at least in this direction, as maybe we build to higher levels, stages of reorganization, et cetera, and so forth. And one thing, by the way, that this chapter also does, that they point out very clearly, is that they're not providing, they're saying we don't have everything figured out. There isn't one clear way that this is going to happen, that there isn't, so what they're doing is setting up a general, I don't know, rubric may be the right word, a general framework for how a new socialist government would be organized and what it might look like, and then recognizing that obviously things are going to have to be amended, it's going to have to adjust itself, as all governments do. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I did go back actually earlier today and look at my favorite Federalist paper, because federalism again is one of the themes here, the problems with federalism. And as they say here, it is worth dwelling on the reasons for replacing a federal system of government with a centralist one. The so-called founding fathers were a tiny handful of capitalists and landowners who built this, who created all of.
It actually does say this in the book. I know it's hard to see on my screen. It says, the so-called founding fathers were a tiny handful of capitalists and landowners who created a form of government that secured their narrow and so-called inalienable rights to secure and profit from their private ownership of land, enslaved people, and commercial capitalist enterprises. They designed a form of government that was limited, tortured form of democracy, a form of democracy that only existed to protect their political supremacy. That's why whiteness means capitalism. It's political supremacy of that time in their territory and for their commercial enterprises.
This is, they say, for their political supremacy in their territory and for their commercial enterprise. Federal system.
Wait, hang on. I want him to go back and I want to see the other page.
Their territory and for their commercial enterprise.
The federal system they designed makes it impossible for us to deal with the existential crisis we face today, a looming global climate catastrophe that threatens the existence of human rights and other living things. The system even prevents us from responding to the extreme weather events and rising sea levels that are happening right now. So now you're getting into the argument of capitalism created the climate crisis. Capitalism created all the problems we're having with the environment, and so in order to fix the environment, we need to abolish capitalism. That's where this argument goes, okay? A wildfire that starts in California can make it hard to breathe in Oregon and Nevada. Smoke and soot don't take state boundaries into account. Socialists don't believe in boundaries. Michigan approved a nuclear power plant on the shores of Lake Superior. If this plant, built by capitalists prioritizing the money in their pockets, melts down, the released radioactive waste can contaminate the Great Lakes, which contain 25% of the planet's fresh water supply. The catastrophic impact extends far beyond the boundaries of Michigan. The federal system also blocks the kind of collective and public-minded action necessary for confronting pandemics. Capitalism created the COVID-19 pandemic. There it is. COVID-19 is the latest, but certainly not the last pandemic. As the world knows it, COVID-19 casualties in the United States are the highest in the world. Each state and even different cities and towns in a given state adopted its own rules, regulations, and health policies and protocols in response to a virus that infects you whether you live in Texas or New York or anywhere else in the country. The federal system wastes state resources which are produced through the labor of working people. It uses them ineffectively and at a counter purpose to the cascading multiple crises.
Federal system wastes resources which are produced through the labor of working people.
I want to just watch him reading this book. Most of the people in the U.S. as sharing the same set of constitutionally guaranteed rights. The problem with the federal system is that it creates a patchwork of rights. The state you live in can have a big impact on the rights you have. A woman living in New York State can schedule an abortion anytime during her pregnancy as one of 100 medical facilities. As early as 2022, a woman living in Texas has just 6 weeks after conception to schedule an abortion, and many women don't know they're pregnant for months. Months, seriously. Although the laws are changing rapidly as Republican legislatures wage war on women's reproductive freedom, we have reproductive justice. In approximately 30 states, women must receive state-directed counseling,
which are produced through the labor of working people,
designed to discourage abortion before their procedures.
And then they go through several examples of.
This book is called Socialist Reconstruction. It's from the Party of Socialism and Liberation. It's basically their guide for what they see as the socialist utopia following the revolution.
More of why this is a problem. Here again is where they bring up that phrase I was talking about, that as they say, we need to move past fossil.
Yeah, they're talking about ending fossil fuels. So again, it comes back to environmental justice.
Fuels, and they talk more about this. I'm not belaboring some of the details here because I think the examples are helpful, but I'm more interested in summarizing some of the major themes, and I think what they're trying to lay out here. Maybe we can come back to it. Certainly, if you read the book on your own, if you haven't already, they support their argument here with a variety of examples. But the point here is that as they say here, ending the use of fossil fuels is the key to survival of humans and other species. It requires urgent action. It also requires full spectrum planning so that the transfer to other energy sources can happen quickly and effectively, as we set out in Chapter 3. Only nationwide planning and large-scale reconstruction.
Yes, the first step is to blame the current system for everything, because the goal of this book is revolution over the current system.
Of the entire economic system can mitigate the economic disruption energy conversion will cause. So this is, again, an example of why they're arguing for federalism, against federalism, and for a democratic centralization of government under a socialist politics. But I couldn't help. I went back and looked at Federalist Paper number 10 by James Madison, who Cornel West said was a revolutionary. But he did kind of say that, though. He did. We love the dear brother, though, and we support the dear brother. We support the dear brother. We love the dear brother. But he did say it, though. But in this Federalist Paper, James Madison, the enslaver, the vicious trafficker of human beings, the dog that he was, said, if you read Federalist Paper number 10, it's written in that tricky language of that day and of that class. But this part here, I think, does enough to summarize. I think, no, I just lost it. And making it bigger. All right, hold on a second. Let me just find my word. The word is wicked. All right, there we go. So the point, just very quickly. So obviously, and I'm sure many of you know this at least as well as I do, that Madison was talking in this Federalist Paper about factions, and he's saying why factions are bad. And what he's saying ultimately is factions are bad because they allow for, especially if you don't have federalism, it allows for pockets of influence to rise up and use their numbers over the threatened minority. Now, of course, I even had this, I remember I was one of my favorite undergrad moments. This white professor actually tried to tell me, this is in 1990, whatever, and I'm an undergrad, but even then I understood this point. He's trying to tell me that Madison actually was saying minority in the context that the word is used today, and that Madison was actually trying to defend minorities such as Black people and other folks, trying to leave out the fact that, of course, he was owning them. So he couldn't, that was not the minority he was worried about. The minority, of course, that he was worried about were the only real minority that ever is the concern of the world, rich white men. That's it. And he was saying, as a member of that faction, we, a minority, need to be protected. So his whole argument is against democracy. It's against everybody having an equal vote and an equal say. His whole point is we need to federalize and create some distance. We need representatives, and we need to make sure that we set this up so that these folks who want to engage in what he describes here as a wicked project of land redistribution and an end of debt, that they can't just rise up. So as he says here, the influence of factious leaders may kindle a flame within their particular states, but will be unable to spread a general conflagration through the other states. A religious sect may degenerate into a political faction in a part of the Confederacy, but the variety of sects dispersed over the entire face of it must secure the national councils against any danger from that source. A rage for paper money, for an abolition of debt, for an equal division of property, or for any other improper or wicked project will be less apt to pervade the whole body of the Union than a particular member of it in the same proportion as such a malady is more likely to taint a particular county or district than an entire state. So he's saying the redistribution of property, the abolition of debt, is an improper project and a malady that must be protected against. So that's why I love that this book is saying, in its own different way, federalism is set up to fail, and we can't do big projects that need to be done to solve this country's and the world's problems in this context. In fact, this is the part, he said, the supposed benefits of federalism, local empowerment, and the protection of, quote, minority rights are a sham, and in fact can be more substantively fulfilled in a new socialist government as we describe below. And then, I wrote, that was my note to myself about. So then, so they talk a little bit beyond this about a flexible or fluid revolutionary process and a design of the socialist government. And then they talk a little bit about, which I thought was fascinating. I hope my notes transferred from one device to the next. Nationwide planning. Maybe not. So what I will just simply do here is not a problem. It's not a problem because I took notes. So they talk about dividing the government into two houses.
Okay.
One of them, the first chamber.
See, okay, now we're getting into it. Okay. So here is what they want for the socialist government. So they've overthrown the Constitution. They've overthrown our current system of government. That no longer exists. So now what do socialists actually want for their government? We're just going to read the book. I'm just going to say. Socialist government has to ensure that decisions impacting the entire country are taken and overseen by bodies with representation from the entire country. To this end, we envision a central socialist government that, like the current U.S. government, has two chambers. For legislation to become law, it will need to pass both chambers. Unlike the current government, the socialist one will be designed to be truly representative. The first chamber will be the National People's Assembly. Conforming loosely to the current House of Representatives, the National People's Assembly will consist of delegates elected from local election districts and from mass organizations representing various sectors in society, labor unions, women's organization, youth, etc. It will need to be numerically much larger than the current 435-member House of Representatives in order to guarantee adequate representation from all urban.
Would be.
Hang on, we're just gonna wait for him to turn the page.
The first chamber will be will consist.
I don't care. I want the next page. I want the next page.
Organizations, youth, etc.
In order to guarantee adequate representation from all urban regions, smaller towns, and rural areas. Currently, there is one representative in Congress for every 750,000 citizens in the country. This is an absurdly small number for a democracy. For instance, in Cuba, there is one member of parliament for every 20,000 citizens. In addition to expanding the number of representatives, Socialist Reconstruction will establish guidelines guaranteeing the working class character of the National People's Assembly and requiring women make up at least half of the elected delegates. The redrawn administrative units discussed in the preceding section will ensure that the National People's Assembly is representative of multinational working class. No longer will the 83% of the country who live in urban areas be dominated by interests of those living in low populated, primarily white districts. None of the delegates will be full-time politicians. The second chamber will be the Assembly of Oppressed Nations. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? They're including an element of globalism in the United States. Well, it wouldn't be the United States anymore. They're including an element of globalism in the future socialist government. The Assembly of Oppressed Nations will replace the U.S. Senate, the U.S. version of Britain's House of Lords. For the last 440 years, the U.S. capitalist class has secured its wealth and domination over society by the theft of the land from the indigenous peoples and the nations of North America, and by the enslavement and subsequent super oppression and the exploitation of African Americans. Yeah, we're gonna have to read this book. We're just gonna have to fucking read this book. I thought we could just get a nice overview. We're actually just gonna have to read this book. We'll do a book club for it. I know I say that all the time, but we actually do need to read this book. I was even thinking of just doing it for like the Inner Circle podcast and just reading it and analyzing it for that, but like I actually do want to go through and read this now. Institutions of racism were constructed to enforce this system and ensure the ongoing disenfranchisement and marginalization of tens of millions of people. To correct the historic injustice and to guarantee the full unity of the working class on the basis of genuine equality, I'm going to try to find a PDF of this book, by the way. I bet you anything I can find a PDF of this book. Don't fucking buy it. Don't give them money. I'm positive, because socialists, remember guys, socialists don't believe in intellectual property. And so socialists are not really all that likely to actually enforce things like copyright because they don't believe in it. So I'm going to go find a PDF of this. No one actually spend money on this, okay? To correct the historic injustice and to guarantee the full unity of working class on the basis of genuine equality, the Assembly of Oppressed Nations will function as a second chamber. It will consist of delegates from oppressed nationalities and peoples. To become law, proposed legislation will need to secure a majority of votes in both the National People's Assembly and the Assembly of Oppressed Nations. Regional and local affairs will be managed by either a regional people's assembly or larger urbanized groups, or a local people's assembly for smaller cities, towns, and rural areas. Unlike the undemocratic and ineffective...
The other house...
He just went back there.
So is even more exciting.
He's going back.
I like what they do here. The second chamber will be the Assembly of...
look at that. Look at that. We've already got social media comment section in the chat. Stony Baloney. We already have a PDF of the book. Thank you, Stony Baloney, for a PDF of the book. Yes, we are definitely winning. You know what, guys? I think I'm just going to cut it there. We now have a PDF of the book. I want to spend a little time with the PDF of this book. I want all of you to spend time with the PDF of the book. I'm going to put the link over on Rumble for people watching over on Rumble. For people watching on YouTube, you can download it based on the link that Stony Baloney sent. There you go, over on Rumble. Because I just like this guy's just not like his like I'm not uninterested in his perspective. He's obviously like a communist, right? So I'm not uninterested in his perspective, but it's like I just kind of want to be able to... I thought he was going to do more of a close read of the book than what he's doing, and I actually just want to sit down and do a read of the book because my interest is in what they want to create in their future socialist utopias. So not a totally wasted stream. I think it was actually really informative. This is just something I want to pick apart a little bit more. Now, as a reminder, this is not my last stream of the day. This is my first stream of the day. We will be doing Disenrage at 9 p.m. tonight. So we're going to come back. I think Jennifer wants to do the Anunnaki again, or we'll find something else. Disenrage is more of like a spiritual show. It's more like not political discussion at all. It's like our nice little break that we take on Tuesday evenings at 9 p.m. So you can come back. Yes, we'll post it in the lounge, Rottweiler. Don't worry about that. So you can come back at 9 p.m. tonight, and when we'll do some other stuff. We'll do some spiritual stuff if you want. But I think that that's good for today. Now, as a reminder, guys, certainly this is something I am going to be posting about over on the Substack. If you want to support the work I'm doing and get all of the best breakdowns, and actually there's going to be a lot of fucking posts on the Substack coming up, I'll tell you that. So you can head over to my Substack, which is Carlin, Karlyn. Oh, wait, look, we got another one right in at the very end. Right in at the very end, we got another retard in the chat. Hang on. I thought we were only going to get one today. Hang on. Shoot, my live chat on YouTube needs to Did someone already ban this person? Oh no, hang on. Hang on. Who wants to guess? 1 in the chat if you think that Facts Over Feelings has ever chatted in on this channel before. 2 in the chat if you think that Facts Over Feelings has no history of chatting in on this channel. It's our second one today. And then you make fun of James for being too Gnostic while you talk for hours with self-proclaimed witches. Guess what? You don't have to watch, do you? So what do people think? So we said 2 in the chat if this person's never been on the channel before. Ban. I'm such a libertarian. I love banning people. Well, as you know, Jill. As you know. As a reminder, this is who we're talking to right now. This is the unhinged 500-pound shut-in known as Poetry Painter on Twitter. Poetry Painter comes into my chat every single day and creates new accounts just to cause problems. This is who we're talking to right now. As you know, Jill, I'm a fascist. I'm the queen bitch fascist of this channel. You are here by my consent. The only reason we're allowing you and I'm acknowledging you right now is to make fun of you because you're a 500-pound shut-in who has nothing better to do than to be disruptive on other people's streams because you're not smart enough to follow the content, Jill. You're just not smart enough to follow the content. And as you can see by all the 2s in the chat, we all know who you are. No, it's not ironic, Jill. You're just a psycho. You're just... Oh, see? That kind of sounds like a woman, doesn't it? Kind of sounds like a 50, 60, some odd year old, 500-pound shut-in fat ass who never leaves their house, has no job, has nothing to do other than cause problems on the internet all day, every day because no one loves her. And she's looking for validation from everyone else. You cannot fathom the possibility that you have more than one critic. Hey, Jill, you know what's going to be proven right about this? When you write another chapter of your book that no one gives a fuck about, in which you take screenshots of these moments and say, I just can't believe that Carlin would be so mean to someone in her chat. So you're going to show yourself, girl. You've done it a million times before because I am the entire center of your world. Don't think I don't know that, Jill. I am the main fucking character in your world. I am all you think about. You obsess about me all day, every day. You do nothing but think about me. You're probably like creaming in your fucking pants right now that I'm even talking to you. Is this turning you on, Jill? Is this turning you on? Is this why you're always obsessed over me? Are you really a fucking lesbian? Is that what you want? I know lesbians love me, Jill, and I know you kind of look like a 500-pound fat-ass lesbian in this photo, but like, is that really what we're talking about here, Jill? Is it? Oh, no, Jill. No. We know who you are. We know who you are. We know who you are, and now you're going. Now you're going. Yeah, maybe Ozempic will be covered under Biden's welfare, Jill, because we all know you need Biden's welfare in order to be able to subsist because you're a 500-pound fat-ass shut-in that has no job. Anyway. Rent-free. Per usual. Bye, Jill. But more importantly, if you want to support the work I'm doing, head over to my Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. I will be posting about the book over on the Substack, so if you missed the link, you can find it over there. And I'll be posting it on Twitter as well. And if you want to follow along with the book I'm writing called Re-Education, the Definitive Anti-Communist Guide to Decoding the Left, head over to speaksocialist.substack.com. It is a separate Substack where I write my book chapters and release them publicly before they get published in the book. So you don't have to wait for the book to come out. You can actually read the book as it's being written on the Substack and get access to the chapters. And I've been recording podcasts to do audio versions of them. I got a little bit more work to do. I do need to get caught up on that, but I'm really just trying to bang out as much writing as possible. We'll catch up with the podcast stuff later. You can also get a free t-shirt if you sign up as a founding member on either speaksocialist.substack.com or carlin.substack.com. Founding membership is the highest level of membership. It is $250 a year. So you're one of my highest level supporters. And if you sign up on both as founding members, you get 2 t-shirts. How cool is that. Instructions on how to claim your free shirt is available in the post on the Substack, so you can find out how to submit the survey. A whole bunch of you have already submitted the survey, which I do really appreciate. Thank you to everyone who supports my work. I can't do it without you guys. I am in your debt because I am 100% funded by you. I'm grassroots funded, no political organizations. My only job is to tell you the truth and to show you receipts. And I'll be back again tomorrow at 5 p.m. to do just that. So thank you for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Some idea.
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.